everyone, my name is Timothy Harris, and today I'm here at the UCSF Mission Bay campus with Dr. Gregory Marcus. Dr. Marcus is a doctor that specializes in a pacemaker device. So Dr. Marcus, I've already introduced you just a little bit, but I'd like to ask, who are you and what do you do?
So I'm Greg, thanks for having me. I'm a professor of medicine and also a physician that practices specifically in a field called cardiac electrophysiology, which is a subspecialty of cardiology focusing on heart rhythm disorders.
So what are some developments in mobile health technology that you want to see within the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, we now recognize that commonly worn smartwatches, for example, can detect arrhythmias, but there's a lot of concern that might result in a lot of false positive results. So people getting anxiety-provoking alerts that actually aren't problematic, and yet those people may rush to the emergency room, for example, and use healthcare resources that could better be spent elsewhere. So refining those algorithms to help people understand what actually is actionable, what they need to seek medical care for or not. Part of that, interestingly, is going to be educating the public about the nature of heart rhythm disorders. When people think about, I think, heart disease, they're often thinking just about a heart attack, which really has to do with the plumbing of the heart, the blood flow. But there's this whole other field that has to do with the electrical properties of the heart and heart rhythm problems. And that's really what these smartwatches are built to detect. One heart rhythm disorder in particular called atrial fibrillation, which is extremely common, can cause stroke, can cause horrible symptoms, but is extraordinarily rare in young, healthy people, meaning a lot of the people wearing smartwatches. So we need to figure out how to educate the public appropriately and how to make sure those devices are used in ways that actually will cause more benefit than harm.
From all the research that you've done, what do you think is the most significant contribution that contributes to heart disease?
So it's varied, for sure. One of the things we're appreciating more and more is the importance of lifestyle. So again, I think it's well known in the public that people recognize that smoking, high cholesterol, so a lot of sugar, a lot of certain types of fats, certainly not being fit, not exercising, all those things can contribute to the risk of a heart attack. We're now recognizing similar risk factors, although they can be different, might be important to heart rhythm disorders. So for example, we and others have shown that drinking alcohol, which I think commonly is considered heart healthy, and in fact, one drink a day may be heart healthy in some ways. Alcohol, especially in excess, can really increase the risk for dangerous heart rhythm disorders. We also now recognize that being physically inactive may increase the risk for these heart rhythm disorders. We just published a paper showing that not only methamphetamine, cocaine, and opioids increase the risk, but cannabis seems to perhaps increase the risk for atrial fibrillation. So what's encouraging about these data is that they suggest that individuals in the public, that patients actually have a lot of power and they can exercise choice. Of course, it's our job to make sure that that choice is informed by evidence to actually influence their risk.
So in the healthcare field, a lot of times sometimes you just have to make a decision whether it's right or wrong. And it's good to think through things and wait for the perfect time to make the perfect decision. But then a billionaire named Dan Pena, one quote he said is, you got to take action and you got to work. So what end of the spectrum do you rate yourself on? Impulsive or action taker?
I would say somewhere in between, but it certainly is important, especially in science, to move forward, to learn from your mistakes, to not be too fearful of making mistakes because you have to take risks. And there is a difference, and it's a kind of a broad spectrum between if we think about taking care of patients versus running experiments and implementing experiments and trying to discover new things. So taking care of patients, in the Hippocratic Oath, it's first do no harm. And certainly we err on the side of avoiding harm. Even there, though, when we're trying to make a decision, should we do a procedure or not? What procedure should we do? We recognize there's risks. And we have to be very transparent with our patients to explain those things. Patients are in my experience, amazingly understanding and empathetic to those things. Thankfully, the great majority of time, procedures go just fine, but once in a while, there's a complication. We learn from those. But again, we err on the side of caution and safety and really do everything we can to minimize risk. Science, on the other hand, is generally different. Again, deciding what research to pursue, you definitely want to perhaps err a little bit more on the risk-taking side, as long as that's bolstered by honesty and transparency. And in fact, science only progresses through criticism and through understanding failure and learning from that failure. One of the things I tell my mentees over and over again is don't fight the data. Meaning you see something that is contrary to what you expected, even if that's not the main thing you were looking at. There are many cases, in fact, there are some Nobel Prizes where people could have swept that under the rug and said, well, everybody knows that's not really how it works. But instead they realized that's totally, that can't, I think I screwed that up because that's not what we expected. If you pursue that, that's when you find new things, and that's how you make progress. So again, I would say it depends on the context, and good to be flexible when it comes to those sorts of things.
I see. So describe your early childhood and how you found yourself going to medical school and then practicing medicine and working at UCSF.
Sure. So I grew up in Berkeley, California, which was an extraordinarily diverse place, which was fantastic, and learned a lot, not just academically, but socially in that environment, going through the public schools all the way. And I remember very well being in high school. And again, Berkeley is a fantastic place with people from many different backgrounds and also benefits from having the university there, the University of California, Berkeley. And one of the parents was a scientist at UC Berkeley. And I remember very distinctly him saying, I can't believe they pay me to do what I do. And at the time, it wasn't like, as a high school student, I was like, oh, I want to be a scientist, or I didn't know what I wanted to be at that point. But I still remember that. And so I think that still influences me, that it's not just like, you can think, well, I want to have an easy job and make a whole bunch of money. It's like, okay, well, why do you want that? Well, so then I can hang out. Like, okay, what are you going to do when you hang out? Why do you want to hang out? Well, so I can have fun. Okay, you're going to just have fun all the time. Wouldn't it be even better if you could actually have fun doing your job? And that was what was incredible about that guy. Clearly a smart guy, not the richest guy in the world, but a scientist, professor at UC Berkeley. And he loved doing what he did. So that was a bit of an influence. As an undergraduate, I was an undergraduate at UC San Diego and was a philosophy major because I was very interested in kind of the meaning of life. Why are we here? What matters? Those sorts of things. And when I decided to be a philosophy major, which is not really a traditional path for those going into medicine, I decided at the same time I would go to medical school. And that was because I recognized that the philosophy side was a little bit intangible, and I worried it wouldn't have enough of an impact on other people. And I recognized that, well, I don't know what the meaning of life is, but certainly suffering is worse than not suffering. Having, a loved one die early is certainly something people don't want. They may not know what is the meaning of life we're aspiring to, but those are fairly basic things that pretty universal, pretty clear. And I just decided, well, at least if I'm a doctor, I can work to alleviate suffering, and maybe I could even save someone's life. So that's what made me decide to go into medicine. I didn't, again, at every step, I didn't know where I was going to end up, which I think is very common. Things are incremental, they're organic, and I tried to embrace the opportunities as best I could as they came in. When I went into medicine, I had no idea what specialty I was going to pursue. As a medical student, I really enjoyed internal medicine mainly because at least my experience was that the residents I worked with as a then medical student liked to talk about things, to think about things, to discuss things. and were very scholarly and enjoy debating concepts and new ideas. And I was more exposed to that with that group than any other subspecialty. So decided to do medicine. And then in my 4th year, so cardiology is a subspecialty of internal medicine. Once you are done with medical school, you then decide on what residency. Mine was internal medicine, which is probably the biggest residency, and there's a lot of stuff you can do from there. And I think it's important to maybe emphasize to your audience, just in case this isn't clear, I think there are a lot of young people who would love to be a physician or would love to be a scientist or both. And they think, yeah, but I don't want to spend all that time in school. And I think they don't really understand that the school, the education you're getting is totally different than sitting in class in high school, right? That is the early part of medical school, and then you're on the wards and you're doing exciting things. So 1 month you're on the wards taking care of patients with pneumonia and heart attacks. The next month you're delivering babies, like delivering babies. I don't mean sitting in a classroom. I mean as a 3rd-year medical student delivering babies. The next month you're doing surgeries. You're holding, the retractor for the holding the abdomen open. The next month you're seeing sick kids in a clinic, etc. That is what medical school is. And then you go into residency where you really are taking care of patients. That's all you're doing. You love to sit in class. Once in a while, people will actually give you a talk, and you're delighted at that point to sit and rest and just passively receive some information. So anyway, so when I was a 4th year, last year medical student, I did a cardiology rotation, which I loved for a couple reasons. One, it was so evidence-based. And I remember one of the cardiologists asking us, we just prescribed a medicine. You just said, so why did I prescribe that medicine? And it wasn't just because, well, this is how the medicine works, and so if it works that way, it should do this and that. It was because there were randomized trials that showed that people randomly assigned to getting this medicine versus a blinded placebo lived longer and felt better. And cardiology is full of evidence-based. It's got to be proven to work before the expert consensus will say, yeah, you should do this. And the other, well, 2 other things with cardiology. One, there's a lot of physiology. So it's not simply memorizing lists of things. It's understanding how things happen, things you can deduce, and concepts you can grasp and teach, which is really fun. And then third, there are procedures in cardiology that can be curative in some cases, where you with your hands are curing a patient or literally saving a life. So when I became a intern and then resident at Stanford, I thought, okay, I either want to do general internal medicine, like a general primary care physician, or cardiology. I wasn't sure. Did a cardiology rotation and just loved it. And then as a resident, learned there was this subspecialty that focused on the heart rhythm, and learned that there are really cool procedures called catheter ablations, where again, you can cure some people of fast rhythms. You can put in pacemakers, you can put in defibrillators and perhaps save people's lives. And again, in addition to this kind of definitive surgical sorts of approach, you also had a very intellectual side of things, where there's a lot of puzzle solving, and you see there's a heart rhythm disturbance, but you don't know the mechanism, and you can infer it by understanding the electrocardiogram, by understanding certain maneuvers we can do actually that are now a matter of routine inside the patient's heart using catheters, where you pace the heart in a certain way and you see how it behaves, and then you can infer the mechanism, which tells you where to go in and burn a certain part of the heart to potentially cure patients of fast rhythms. So subsequent after that was a cardiology fellow here at UCSF, and then after that, an electrophysiology fellow here at UCSF. And then after that, as a faculty member, was fortunate to get a grant from the NIH that helped to fund some additional coursework, which I was, again, delighted to undergo, in epidemiology and clinical research and biostatistics. So I would imagine that, again, many in the audience may be thinking, man, that's a long time. But all of that time is really interesting, really exciting, And what you're doing is really important. I mean, you are directly interacting with patients, and for those of you that have been patients or had family members, for these individuals and for myself when I'm the patient, that's a big deal for that person. So it's really a privilege for us to not only be able to interact with them at those times, explain things to them, and most of the time really get to help them. And that's really fantastic. And all through this training, that's what you're doing. You're not sitting there in class taking notes. You're interacting in very meaningful ways with people and actually really positively affecting their lives, or at least that's the goal.
So I want to kind of go back to the randomized trial and then the decision to not give the evidence-based stuff. I mean, it seems like a lot of this science is kind of like, I'm going with the gut feeling here. I don't know if it's black or white. I mean, what's your perception of that?
Yeah, so we've learned in medicine, I think medicine has led the way to understanding that what intuitively makes sense or seems to work may be wrong. And that the randomized trial is really the best way to determine what is causally helpful or not. And there are many stories, and this is part of scientific training and also part of good medical training, is to recognize our biases and to recognize we're all biased. Can't help it. So I do feel quite strongly that bias should not be viewed necessarily as a negative thing. It's just being human, right? You can't help it. But recognizing your bias and not letting that dictate your decisions, that's what's so important and very difficult to do. But I'll get a classic example in my field of electrophysiology, which is actually taught to all medical students, is a trial famously called CAST, for Cardiac Arrhythmia Suppression Trial, where it was known that people with frequent early beats, called PVCs, premature ventricular contractions, in the lower chamber, who have had heart attacks, they died suddenly. There were some drugs that there was some evidence they could suppress these early beats. So a randomized trial was done where patients in a blinded way, randomly assigned, either got these drugs, flecainide and echinide, or placebo. And yes, indeed, the flecainide, echinide, the people who got the flecainide, echinide had less PVCs. Great. But they died more. So it increased mortality. So yes, PVCs led to more death. Yes, flecainide, echinide suppressed the PVCs, but they increased death. So the intuitive thing doesn't work. And that's just one of many examples. And there's all sorts of confounding that can happen with observational studies where you're not intervening. So we always have to be skeptical. And part of being a good scientist, part of being a good doctor, is being skeptical. And it's very important to distinguish being skeptical from being cynical. In fact, I would say that, if you're really skeptical, you should be. That means you should do it in an optimistic way. You're not assuming bad things. You're just critiquing. And this goes back to what I said before about being critical. So you want to be skeptical because that's how you learn new things. And if something stands up to the skepticism, then that maybe suggests that's a good thing to do. But it's really important that we are evidence-based and that we ask questions, that we're assertive, that we similarly, are open to receiving feedback on ourselves, because none of us are perfect. But understanding that sort of process and practicing medicine as best we can, using an evidence base is the ideal, and being open with our patients. And the reality is, now you might say, well, there's so much stuff we still don't know. And there's so much stuff that's thrown out there. Why don't we just do randomized trials on all these things? Eggs. Why don't we do a randomized trial of eggs? And the answer is, it's really hard. It's expensive. It's difficult to do. And nutrition sort of research is full of this sort of thing, which is a problem with nutrition. And this is part of what we've tried to do, is actually some of this stuff with alcohol, for example, which is also difficult. We're trying to do a major study to answer this very common question. Is a drink a day, a glass of wine a day, just one, better or worse for health? We still don't know because there's no randomized trials. But randomized trials are expensive, they're hard to do. And so we have to recognize there are a lot of circumstances where there's just not data available. So in those cases, you don't throw up your hands and give up. you go based on the available evidence, but oftentimes that evidence is imperfect.
So what's your guilty pleasure?
My guilty pleasure: sleeping, watching good, fun TV. I do love a good cup of coffee, although our recent evidence favors the health of that, the health effects of that. In fact, there's a conventional wisdom that coffee, caffeine increases arrhythmias. We have found perhaps the opposite, that at least in some cases, coffee may actually reduce the risk of some arrhythmias. And then spending time with my family and playing with my daughters. Not that that's, I guess it's not guilty, it's just something I really enjoy.
I see. So you studied philosophy, and one of the concepts that come up in philosophy is like comfort is like the cousin of death. So it has me like thinking about your scientific stories, like, you know, like a glass of alcohol. Well, okay, yeah, that's comfort. And like in every example, we've shown that comfort, you know, leads to like more suffering in the future. So like, even if the scientific studies do show results, intuitively, do you like, what's your perception or what's your bias of that?
Well, I think I wouldn't say comfort alone. I would say certainly a balance of things. So it's that we don't want to err on the side of all one thing. We do have to recognize that what we do now has long-term implications. You know, good things tend to come with habits. Bad things happen, unfortunately, you know, can happen very suddenly. It's easy to destroy something, to take something down, to get quickly injured. And the good things in life, in my experience, come from steady whatever. And it tends to be a habit of exercise, a habit of good sleep, a habit of forgiving yourself and being kind to other people, a habit of brushing your teeth. You know, it's rarely some sudden sort of thing. But comfort and rest, relaxation, fun, those are all important. It just, those shouldn't necessarily be the primary goal, but you definitely need to work those in to be productive.
Yes. So what's your advice that you have for a STEM student that, you know, has a bit of self-doubt or doesn't know if this is the right thing to do? What would be their first step they need to take?
Yeah, so I would say a few things. So number one, you can do whatever you want. I mean, that's just the reality. And the most important thing of whether you can get there is not to give up. You got to keep trying. You know, there's evidence that grit, stick-to-itiveness, tenacity is more important than how smart you are, where you went to school. So sticking with it, not giving up. Part of that is recognizing, is making sure you're not constraining yourself too much. So you don't want to tell yourself, well, I'm not that sort of person. I couldn't do that. Yes, you can. Now, it is a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like once you start to believe that, then you will try harder. But just stick with it and recognize that many, many people, if not most people that are in these positions like myself, I never thought this is what I would be doing. And there's no reason it couldn't be you. So if that's the only thing is that something you want to do? If that's something you want to do, you stick with it and you can do it.
All right. Well, it's a pleasure, Dr. Marcus. I do appreciate you now.
All right, my pleasure.
All right. Thank you.